Okay, so we're going to do good morning. First of all, thank you for being here. So hard to stop what you're doing sometimes and come to something like this. So thank you so much. We hope it's going to be helpful. We've worked a lot on this, and we're so excited just to share what we have come up with. But a little introduction first. A lot of you know me. You know me, Ashley Howard. I might share a few more details though that you may not know. But my husband is Tracy Howard. He's actually here on the Lakeside campus as athletic director. And we have both been in education for 20 years, and this is starting our 20th year. So we're really excited. I love kids, love being around kids, and we have two of our own, Houston. And this is an example of how not to be intentional. This is probably the last really good family photo that we had. But so Houston looks very different. Emerson looks a little bit like the same, but he is a junior here, and Emerson is in 5th grade, and they just love it here, and we love them being here as well. But I'm originally from Tennessee and came over to go to college at the University of Mary Hardin-Baylor and met Tracy there, and he recruited me to stay in Texas for the long term. So I did. My mom still thinks that she dropped me off at camp. She's like, I dropped you off at camp and you never came back. What happened? And so that's how we met. We met at Mary Hardin-Baylor, and so we had a really good time there experiencing that. And he played baseball there, and then over the summer, I actually trained for an organization called Capturing Kids' Hearts. And what that organization does is it just teaches teachers how to build strong foundational relationships with students. And so the students themselves can really reach their full potential. And so being able to transfer some of the things that we do there into our parenting, you'll probably hear a few things from that as well today. So it's really fun getting to see teachers' light bulbs come on and then also hear them say, I could absolutely use this in parenting. So that's just a little background on me. And so I'm going to kick it off to Bob and let him go ahead and introduce himself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. So my name is Bob Booth. I have multiple connections to this school for which you could identify me. I am Allison's husband. I am Ella's dad. I am McKenna's dad. These are the things I actually hear a little bit more when I'm in this environment. Allison's a receptionist over at Chisholm Trail campus and my inspiration for how to parent. And those of you who know her and get to interact with her there will see some of those reasons why, and I'll call some out when we're chatting. I have Ella, who is an 8th grader here, and I have McKenna, who is a 6th grader. I am an anesthesiologist by training. So our plan is for Ashley to kind of speak to the heart, and then I'm going to give you some real-time information about what mix of drugs you can give to your kids to get them to go to sleep. That is actually my role. And by the way, little known secret, anybody can put somebody to sleep. It's waking them up. That's the hard part. So that is part 2. We will do that in the next session. So please don't try any of this because you've not learned the wake up part yet. No, that is true. I am an anesthesiologist, and that really does not qualify me for this discussion at all. I actually don't think there's anything that really qualifies Ashley and I, with the exception being that we want to do this well, just like you. So we're going to kind of share some things that we've learned. My background is kind of unique. It's very circuitous. It's still probably the fastest route that God could have taken me to get to where I am today. But I was a youth pastor for 2 years in Aledo in the early 2000s. Went back to school and got a master's degree in psychology and worked in campus life during that time. That's when Allison and I actually got married. So our first house was shared with 300 other sophomore boys, which not many people can say. We have moved up from there, which is nice. The house is smaller technically, but we don't have as many roommates, which is nice. In that time, I worked in campus life and got to spend some time working with college students, and then went off to medical school at Texas Tech for 4 years, then residency in Temple, Texas, at Scott White and Temple. We've been in Fort Worth for almost 8 years now, and love Fort Worth. We had multiple schools on the schedule when we were coming into town to try to pick a school. We actually wanted to pick the school before we found a house, and we interviewed, toured. What's the right word? Here, and we canceled the rest. So very thankful for this school. And so it was out of that guilt that I agreed to do this. When Ashley said, "Okay, can you come talk?" So that's a little bit of who I am and the background that I come from. Most recently, I transitioned to be the chief care officer for a virtual care company that does medical and mental health for college students. Newsflash, there is a mental health crisis going on right now. And so it's awful to be needed. It's great to be in the right place when you are needed. And so that's been a really interesting journey. And certainly we can talk about that at any time that you guys want to, if you want to know more about what that looks like. So I think we're going to start off with an interactive portion.
Yes.
So we're, kind of let Ashley kick us off here.
We are. So you just probably took your parenting hat off because your kids are now in school, but we're going to ask you to put it back on. And you can take out your phone and scan this QR code. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about two questions. What is the most rewarding thing about parenting? That's the first question. And then the second question is, what is the most challenging aspect from parenting? And so once you scan this QR code, it's going to take you to a slide and you can start thinking through the rewarding part first. What do you think? Just type in some words. Challenging is first. Great. Challenging is first. Thank you. And I'm going to go right over here. It sure is. And I'm going to actually switch it here. There we go. Let's see. And if you can, does it say on the top of your phone, go to a different slide? Okay. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to yours. Let's see. Yeah, that's perfect. And if you can go to slide at the top of your phone, it should take you back to the rewarding part. Yes. No, this is good. No. This is great. No, this is great. So let's do that again. So the most rewarding and the most challenging aspect of parenting. And you can let me know when you're there and start punching in those words. And I'm going to go here. And there we go.
Ashley and I did this. Well, I'll chit chat while you guys are thinking through. You're putting your words in. It was kind of hard to get it down into just a few words. I kept running into the character limit. Right? There's kind of like if this, then this, when this happens, is what kind of leads to rewarding. But these are some great words popping up.
And I think sometimes it depends on where you are in your parenting journey, which one is easier to answer. Sometimes it can be, yes, I might have a rewarding moment. I might have a rewarding moment this morning, and then in the same day, that afternoon, a most challenging moment as well. So these are great. Building bonds, learning, growing together, seeing their passions.
I'm seeing the concept of growth a couple of times up there, like seeing them grow, growing with them.
I love that unconditional love made it to the center.
Future is a theme. Some of these are maybe getting small for you guys in the back to see there, so I'll call some of them out. A very future-focused mindset, which is definitely rewarding.
Sharing Christ, being able to see your kids share their faith with other people, or even with you, is so top on rewarding. Okay, so that feels good, right? So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. slide, and at the top of your phone, it will say go to next slide. It should. So I'm going to do that now. So now we're thinking, okay, what is the most challenging aspect of parenting? And it was funny because when Bob and I both did this and did it together, he was thinking, I think we talked about how sometimes it can be yours was rewarding and my easiest one to answer was challenging as well. So.
I think depending on the season you're in, one will flow easier than the other. And the day we did this, when we were kind of practicing, full confession, like the challenges popped to my mind first, which I think is that's an okay place to be.
Meltdowns,
I also think these kind of go together. In many ways, I think some of the most rewarding aspects are oftentimes bred out of the challenges.
Fear, the unknowns, all of the things, high expectations. Managing emotions, so true. You know, I have fifth grader that's entering into preteen, you know, and then of course a 17-year-old boy who, you know, is also experiencing some emotions as well. And I think that is really difficult to manage those two different ones, but also being able to know when it's coming too is really difficult. Okay, so these are really great words. And I think that just all of those things that you just thought of, keep them there at the forefront of your mind. And hopefully we will be able to just partner along with you and be able to give you some tips and some tools. And before we get started, though, we both talked about, Bob and I, about how we have to give some disclosures. We have to give some disclosures on parenting. First of all, the first disclosure we wanted to give is that parenting is humbling. It is so humbling. You think you have it figured out, and then you turn around and you clearly don't. I mean, I remember when I had my firstborn, Houston, you know, we would be going in the grocery store and I'd have him in the cart. And all I had to do, if he was even thinking about throwing a tantrum or even thinking about doing something, I would just have to give him just a little look, just raise the eyebrow just a little bit and go and cock my head just a little. And he would be like, okay, yep, I got to get it together. And it switches a little bit when you have another kid. And I remember being in that grocery store thinking to myself, man, I've got it together. I know this parenting gig. I was 20 something. I knew exactly what this parenting gig was all about. And then God decided to let me know that I clearly didn't, because the same things that work for one child, you sometimes doesn't work for the next one. So we want to tell you that just, we know that parenting is humbling. You're going to see us mess up. You're going to see us make mistakes. And it's just this daily journey that we are on, just to give it to God and to let him guide us in everything. And the second disclosure is just that, the journey. We hope that today our goal and our prayer is that you will see ways and travel tips on we can partner together and hold hands and be able to really just talk about all the parenting journey. Sometimes that journey is nice and smooth. Sometimes that journey is rocky. And sometimes you don't even want to go there because it can be really, really hard. And so we want to know that we wanted to make this a collaborative space, a space that we can talk, and a space that we can really be able to share some things together throughout this parenting journey.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashley. So, Joe, I don't want to put you back on the spot, but can you find in your notes the mission again and tell us what the mission is of the family marriages?
To equip and encourage our parents.
I like that. Did you see that? He didn't even look at his notes. Like that's when you got your mission statement down, right? I was like, I'll give you the prompt ahead of time so you can go look. Our hope here, and we were intentional with choosing intentional parenting, as that we could actually encourage you along the path of thinking about landing at an end point. Right, you're intentional when you set out to go on a trip, right? If you're going to the beach and you're going to Florida, right? You structure your life such that you aim that direction and you go that way. And if you get off on the side of the road, you have a flat, or you have to stop and pee like 18 times on the way there, you're still intending to go to Florida, right? You're still intending to go that way. Right. So where are we intending to go, and where is this gonna aim? I have the opportunity to speak to multiple different groups and different audiences. It's actually rare for me to speak to a group of people for whom we are intending to raise our children to fall in love with God and to follow Jesus. And so if you think about what our role is there, the nice thing when you're operating from that position is that you're not alone. And that's God's intention as well, too. Right. And so I hope one of the things that you hear from us today is, because we're going to be pretty confessional about our weaknesses. We're going to be pretty transparent, is that you realize that you are not alone. The fact that you showed up and chose to spend 2 hours of your time doing this probably put you in the 90th percentile in my book already on parenting, because you're just trying. Right. And much of this is about that. I think the expertise, and I use that word with like a little bit of biting of my tongue, that Ashley and I bring is just that we're in the same boat that you're in, right? That we are just intending to raise our kids in a certain way, to where at the end they will look like ones who follow a heavenly father, not act like their earthly father. That's the hope and the goal. We aren't perfect. We aren't perfect. We aren't perfect. And the good news is most of the focus of what we're going to talk about today is not about being perfect. It's actually about being present. I think that's a key piece. When we thought about what it would mean to talk about this, it's a little bit intimidating from the standpoint that there's no shortage of information on how to parent your kids, right? Multiple people within this room have probably read collectively 1,000 books on how to parent kids. Like, Google how to help my kid with whatever, and you are going to get truckloads of information. So what I'm hoping would differentiate this from a Google search would be one that we would be focused on what it means to actually grow our kids in their relationship to God. And two, we're going to be pretty focused actually on you. And I think a big piece of that is because our kids are watching what we do more than what we say. And if your intention is to get your family to Florida and you're going to try to do it from Fort Worth and you're not planning on going to Florida, it is really, really hard to do it at that point. It's not impossible, but logistically, it gets much more challenging. So a large portion of our focus is actually going to be on the interplay of you as a son and daughter and a father, as your identity and the framework from which you operate for how you're trying to raise your kids the same way. So that may feel like we're going to be getting in your kitchen a little bit and rattling around your pots and pans. Apologies for that. I don't feel too bad for you because we started talking about doing this back in like May. And it's when you're thinking about these things, it actually, it can be a challenge because the moment that you focus on this, you start realizing like how often you're coming up short. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay to realize that. It's okay to realize that this is hard. And speaking of hard, it depends on what age your kids are. So I need to know a little bit of like who I'm talking to. I know about half of you in here. So how many of you have kids who are not in school yet? Like, I know some of you probably have. Does anybody have all kids that are like not in school? And because you should teach. You should come up here. And if you are so passionate about parenting that you showed up to a parenting thing, you don't even have kids in school yet, that would be impressive. Okay, so I didn't see anybody that even has like, a younger that's still at home. Raise your hand if you have a kid that's fourth grade or below. Some of you. Okay, good. And some of you are going to raise your hand, multiple kids, that whole thing, right? So how about fifth to eighth? Okay. Ninth through 12th. All right. And then out. All right. Good deal. What's that? Yeah, this is a great mix. So one other disclosure, and we're going to jump in, and I promise. we're on like slide 5. There's 20. We are not going to spend this much time on every slide. We're not going to share anything that's like we invented. And so, wherever I could, I put down I cited my references, right? Bibliography, plagiarism. I mean, I want those in the academic world to know. But there's nothing new under the sun, and that's okay. So we're going to share a lot of different ideas from other people. That's actually the only way that made us feel comfortable coming up here, is just sharing some things that we've picked up along the way. Okay, so I'm going to get us kicked off. It might be easier for me to click through this part, and then I'll hand it back to you. One of the most impactful people in my life was a Bible teacher at Abilene Christian, who set out to lead a monastic lifestyle, to live like a modern day monk. And so he decided that he wasn't going to get married, and he was really going to just focus on the spiritual disciplines and praying and sitting and listening to God and being very patient. But he was also like very easy to connect with. He loved NCAA basketball. He went to the Final Four, like to watch like every year. He was probably, early 50s, I think, when I was interacting with him. Yet he went to, like, every Wednesday night, came to the residence hall that I worked at 11:30 at night to play Texas Hold'em for a couple of hours with his guys, not because he liked poker, but because he really believed that he was there to shape students, not just in the classroom, but out. And so he had this just profound impact on me. And he shared this idea with me and with other people. He talked about how following God was not just about quiet time in the morning, but it was about practicing the presence of God throughout your day. It had such a formative impact on me that the prayer that I'm going to walk you through, or the framework that I'm going to walk you through, has really permeated the last 25 years of my life. And it is the single best tool for recentering me, not just in parenting, but in life. Okay. So there's 4 steps to this. I'm going to walk you through all 4. They're incredibly simple, but they're very, very hard to execute. And so this is, again, not something that you ever master. It's a thing that you think through, that you continue to go back to throughout the day, that helps kind of get you back to where you are. So practicing the presence of God starts with admitting every morning that you can do nothing without God. You are confessing that the very breath that you are going to pull when you first become aware of effort needed to pull a breath in is a gift from God. You would not be able to do it if he was not there. So that right there tells you, if you need him to take a breath, you definitely need him to raise your kids, and he's with you. There's an interesting concept. I won't spend a whole lot of time on it. When I do another talk on gratitude, I spend a lot more time on this. There's an interesting concept called the responsibility bias. And the best way to explain this is probably more like the lead singer syndrome. The lead singer of a band, when the band gets really famous, can sometimes forget that there was also like a drummer behind him and a lead guitarist and the bass player who actually wrote the songs. And kind of out front, kind of you become the figurehead of what it is that you're doing. And the downside there, and there are many, right? But the downside that I want to highlight there is when you forget all the people that helped you get to where you are, you believe that everything is on you. And it's a lot of pressure. And so practicing the presence of God is admitting that you need God in your life as well too. And it's actually free. It is saying, okay, I'm not doing this on my own. I'm going to be facing God and realizing that God has got me to the point that I'm at. And he's going to get me to the next point, and the next point, and the next point. So first thing's easy, right? All you have to do is just admit you can do nothing without God. The next thing is to be fully present to the person in front of you when they're in front of you. We could stop here and probably not get any further because this is incredibly difficult to do. And I think if you walk out of here today with one thought in your head, I'm just going to try to be more present to the person who is in front of me right now in this moment, I think you would have gotten value out of this. We all struggle with this, and I think we understand the reasons why. So I'm not going to unpack all of the distractions in this world. I do want to look at it from a very high view in the sense that our inability to be present has way more to do with our inability to not be in the past and to not look out into the future. And I think that the promise of God being with you as you parent your kids and as you live your life is that you do not have to be overthinking, ruminating, feeling the shame from the past. Right? That is the freedom that we have in grace, is that the past is taken care of. And even if you don't have that worldview and that belief, you can't go change it anyways, right? There's not anything that you can do about that. And so one of the barriers to being fully present to the person in the room right now, I mean, your kids aren't even in here, right? But I mean, just even being present in this moment right now is that we're oftentimes thinking of the past. I wish I'd said this. I should have said this. You can remember with great detail a mistake that you had in parenting your kids, something you said that you regretted 7 years ago, 12 years ago, and you're still thinking about how you would do that different. You got to let it go. You have to be present in that moment. And then there's the future distraction, right? So we have a tendency to be thinking about, what are we going to do for dinner tonight? How am I going to get people to this sport or this activity? And then there's this thing this weekend. And then there was that thing I said back in kindergarten that really messed my kid up. And, they're probably never going to get into college because all they can do is think about that thing that I said. And you begin to start catastrophizing and you're off in the future. And we are forgetting the promise of God that God also has the future mapped out as well, too. So what does Ephesians 2:10 says? It says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand. So it's already mapped out for you that we should walk in them. English was not my strongest language or subject. It is my strongest language. I'm way better at English than I am at any of the other languages. In school, it was not my strongest subject. But the concept that we would walk in something, to me, that's a phrase of presence, right? That we are walking in something right now. Yes, it is something that God has ordained, but God has ordained it for this moment right now. And that's why we're not actually given the whole book at once to read about our life. We don't know what the future looks like. We do know what right now looks like, and that's why we need to be focused. Okay, they're getting a little harder, right? The next thing you need to do, it's so funny, like I know it's advancing over here, but it's not in front of my face, and so that throws me off. When you admit that you need God for everything that you're doing, and you have committed to be fully present to the person that he has placed in front of you and to be present before God, the next thing is to see Jesus in the person that's in front of you, right? So the funny thing is when I talk to this about other people, I show a picture of my daughter, first, dance class, or I think this is actually the first recital. And the idea is that we are, treating other people and thinking of other people based upon the value that they have, that God has given them, right? And McKenna's much older than this now. But in a sense, it is a caricature, right, of that sweet moment. And this is funny because we are talking about parenting, and we know that sometimes this is hard to do with our own kids, right? That they're not always sweet and cute with like little fat rolls and all this kind of stuff. Sometimes they're challenging. Not sometimes, many times they're challenging. But you have to get back into seeing this character, right? You have to get back into seeing who it is that's in front of you. And yes, they're having trouble with math homework, and so are you, while you're doing that with them. And that's all the more reason why you've got to go back in and start saying, okay, who am I working with here? This is an incredibly valuable person. Outside of your own kids, when you begin to pray and think about seeing Jesus in other people, it gets real hard because all of a sudden, like, it feels like God starts putting annoying people in your life around them, and it becomes a challenge. But that's okay, right? It just means that we have to reorient and we have to think about them. So if it wasn't hard enough for you guys to now see Jesus in everybody you interact with, the next piece is to be Jesus. This is definitely a challenge, right? And one for which we're not necessarily going to be able to do all the time. But if this is percolating in your mind, then your mission is clear. You know what you need to do. I mean, you know that you need to love your kids. You know that you need to serve your kids, that you need to serve your spouse, that you need to serve other people around you. And this framework has been incredibly helpful for me. So wanted to share that with you guys. I'm going to hand it back to Ashley, and she's going to talk about our next piece.
And I love what Bob was saying about just seeing the Jesus in front of you in your kid, and just being able to be present with them, to see all the gifts that God has given them and their talents and the things that he has so uniquely given them that maybe they haven't given, or he hasn't given you. And so what we're going to do next, and this is just a smile of Houston, is how he feels when we are fully present with him. He values that. He values that quality time, and he values being able to really have us, that quality time of family. And so we just want to do a quick think, pair, share. And since we are all here, we can just begin to talk out and share some answers that you have. We have a couple of questions just so you can think about as we finish up with that framework that Bob just gave, and the present, being present and with your kids. What does it mean to be present with your kids? So I want you to think about that first. And then I want you to think about when is a time or day or scenario where you might be able to focus on being present with your kids. And I'm going to just clarify that even more. And I think Bob's going to talk a little bit about what is presence. What does that even mean? What does that mean? And how can we focus on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I define presence is actually being there for your kid without actually trying to get something out of them. And I had this epiphany that I felt like I was around the girls a lot. And then I was like, okay, so what does it really mean to be present? When they were little, I think being present meant getting on the floor. It really just meant like getting down their level, like looking at what they were looking at, playing with them, doing that thing. And the epiphany I had the other day was that just means going to their room. You know, if they've gone off and they've gone to another place, sometimes it means just going in that room. And so I defined presence as being time in their space. And that's just one way for you guys to think about it. But if you really want to calculate like what that time is, you have to subtract out the time spent picking up their space while you're talking to them, right? Because you're doing this, but you're actually not paying attention to what's going on with them. It's time minus telling them what to pick up in their space. Or, you know, I feel like 90% of our time at the house, if left unattended, is just yelling across the house about where we need to go next, and then saying what when you didn't hear what the other person said. So I think that's a way to be thinking about it. But I like the way Ashley framed this, that, you know, we want you to be thinking about a specific location or a moment that may happen today, it may happen this weekend, where we want you to be thinking about when you can be present. We really tell them, and it gets less as they get older, right? But we really tell them where to go, what to do, what to eat, when to be there, what time to get. And I think it's incredibly powerful. And Ashley has a little thing on this later, so I won't steal what she's going to say. It is incredibly powerful to let them guide the moment to what you're going to do, and to be willing to, you know, do something maybe you didn't want to do. To be present with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else?
Well, I have found that in the car is the prime time to find out how their day was. By the time we get home, they're thinking about something else or too relaxed to talk or whatever. So I don't have the radio on a lot of the time in the car, and my older daughter will ask, "Can we turn on the radio?" And so first I said, "Okay, let me hear about your day first," and then we focus on that, and then we can have some radio time. And then my younger daughter gets in the car and we kind of do the same thing. But I think that a friend of mine told me years ago, radio kills conversation, and even background noise. It really kind of does. And so that's been a huge thing for me to find out how the day went and go from there with the evening.
I love that. I love that. And I think this next part that we're going to go into, which talks about just being present, I think of it as just something that is simple, something that you just mentioned as well, is listening. How are we listening to our kids, and how are we allowing them to have a voice with us as their parents? And, we think of listening as being very, okay, yes, I'm going to sit down across from you or beside you and make eye contact with you and listening, which that is absolutely part of listening. But I think when I think of listening, I'm thinking of an umbrella of different types of ways that we can listen, ways that we can give them a voice, ways that we can allow our kids to share their interests and to share their talents and share the things that they love. And I think there are a lot of tools and a lot of mindsets that come along with what listening could look like. So this is a little bit of application. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some tools that you can actually put into practice. And then also some mindsets when it comes to listening to our kids and allowing them to feel comfortable to talk with us. Because when we are listening to our kids, I think that I think our kids would feel that internally as presence, as my parent is being present with me because they are listening. They're giving me their undivided attention in different ways. And so we talked about the journey. We talked about how we're going to give you a few travel tips. And so we know that this journey is hard, and we also know that it can very clearly be unmarked, where we don't know what might happen next. What Bob said about just the future, we don't know what it holds. So we hope that this just serves as some guideposts for you as we get into this next little part. So these are some things that I have done that we have done, ideas that have been passed down to us, tools that we have tried that have worked somewhat, things that we have just tried to do with our kids that have been really effective. And the first thing is journal swapping. And this is really, really powerful. I started this a few years ago with Houston. And what it is a cheap spiral that I got from Walmart, just a $1, $2 spiral. And I sat down with both of our kids. I said, okay, this is going to be for you and me. This journal right here is going to be for you and me. And what it is, it's just a place to write letters to each other. And you start small, start simple, and just say, dear Houston, and I date it. Usually that's mainly for me. And just ask questions about their day, ask questions about what they're excited about, but you're writing them. You're not verbally doing that. And we agree on a place of where to put this. You either, where is that place that you're always going to see it? That's what I ask my children. And, sometimes with Houston, it's underneath his pillow on his bed. With Emerson, it might be on her dresser. And we do that back and forth. There's no due date. There's no, hey, we're going to do it once a week. It is just a natural little bit of a swap. And I'm just going to share a story about that. That sounds sweet, right? And cute, and something that probably younger kids would really love. But I'm going to tell you, I have a 17-year-old as well. And so we started this, like I said, a few years ago. And I would just write him. And I noticed naturally that it would just trail off. It's easy in those moments to think a few things. It's easy to think he's too old or he's over it at this point. It's easy to think that we have maybe outgrown that and that it's not impactful anymore. But one thing I did is I kept doing it. I would grab it, write another little thing, date it, put it under his pillow, write it, and do another letter. And one day we were in the kitchen, and this is how life works with teenagers, is we're just ships passing in the night a lot of the times. And he said, "Hey, Mom, I left something on your bed." And I went and found it. And, and so that's why I reference that verse at the bottom, Galatians 6:9, just let's not grow weary. It's hard. It's hard to keep things going. It's hard to keep those things continuing on. But But if we can just remember what God is charging us to do, let's keep doing that. The next one is what you were just talking about, after school questions, the power of the presence in the car. And, there you can find a million after school questions everywhere. But it really is, I just want to affirm that it really is about finding those questions that can get them talking, because that's what we want them to do. When we're listening, we want to get information from them. And that can be certain things like asking, what made you the most confident today? On a scale from 1 to 10, rate your day. And if they said a 7, okay, tell me why. So just some after school questions. It's all about the way you frame it with them, rather than, so tell me about your day. This time you're asking specific questions to them. The next one is just a love language quiz and a family survey. I thought for the longest time that both of my kids actually were words of affirmation people. And so I'm always, giving them, great, you're doing awesome. I love how you did that. And not to say that they don't love that, but I did not know my son specifically, his love language. And so just with some prodding and some asking questions, and also a link, we're going to give you some resources at the end of this as well, just as we're talking through this, so you can refer back to them. But just talking to him and then asking some love language type questions and a quiz, so to speak, for him. And I found out really quickly that his is physical touch. And I did not know that. And for the longest time, I'm filling his bucket with words of affirmation. And now it's shifted for me. And so even though I might see him for 40 minutes during the day, I'm, hey, come here, give me a hug. Hey, another hug. Here's another hug. Here's another high five. And so it's just finding those love languages for our kids and being able to figure out what they need from us. The next one is just power of tradition and what that actually means and why that is even paired with listening. So we know that what tradition is. I think we probably all in this room have some traditions that we have with our families, that it's either going here, like Christmas, or going here for Thanksgiving. And that's fabulous. I think we need to also think about the tradition, or I do at least, what that means for our family and what that does for our kids. And traditions, a lot of times we think are very big. We have to take a big vacation every year. We have to do this big thing. And really, it doesn't have to be that big. Traditions can be super small. It can be something like, let's have a dance party on Thursday night once a week. Let's sit down on Wednesday nights and we all get together as a family and pray. Let's talk about what's to come next week. Maybe that's on a Sunday night. Any kind of tradition that you can start with your family. And what we have found is in those moments are the times where kids will open up to you. Because what tradition does, when you have tradition, set things in your family that you do, and it becomes the things we do, that is when they're going to open up, and it creates this consistency, safety, the security. And of course, the benefit of all of that is also the memories that it makes. But when we're looking at how we want to receive information from our kids and how we want to listen to them, setting up those traditions in our family is so, so valuable and so important to be able to hear who they are and who God has really created them to be. And so they can even take that to their family later on. And then the last two things are more of just mindsets, because our goal with this whole listening umbrella is to get our kids talking. That's our whole goal. How can we connect with them more? And so the last two, especially the underreact, is greater than overreact. And I'm so glad, you probably haven't noticed, but my husband is back there. He slipped in and he would tell you very quickly that he is much better at the underreacting piece than the overreacting. And the reason I even came to this, just thinking about listening as a whole, is because what happens when our kid comes to us with something and we hit the roof? A few things, it's they either shut down, they either decide, oh, probably not the right time to talk to you. And that is really, really, really tough to do. And I'm just going to be honest. When that group text comes in, or when that person, said something not very kind to your kid, or when they heard something they probably shouldn't have heard, my first reaction is to overreact. That is my impulse. And I think that just goes back to the human DNA that we are made of. That's what we want to do. We become mama bear. We want to protect. We want to do those things. And so, and just a quick story there. I came home from middle school a long time ago, and I was telling my mom all of these horrible things that were happening, just going ahead and just letting her have it, and really just telling her. I mean, my emotions were really, really high there. And my mom, she was just in the kitchen doing her thing, and she goes, well, maybe we should talk about that. And I remember going, okay. And at that moment, my emotions came down. So underreact doesn't mean do not act. And I want to make that clear as well. Underreact is not acting at all. It's just being able to tell your kids that, okay, we're gonna bring it down, and we're gonna be calm, and we're not going to we're gonna have a good conversation. Because a lot of times when we overreact, the conversation's done, and then our kids decide that either A, I can't tell mom and dad things now, or I'm gonna know how to get things to a higher level. And just for context here, because I've made it clear that Tracy is much better at that than I am. When you want to overreact, go to another room, overreact all you want, scream, cry, whatever you want to do, and then come right back out and say, okay, we are going to problem solve. We are going to do this together. And that's what I have done with Tracy. It's like, oh my gosh, what is happening? And then go back and talk to the kid. And then yes, Sam, yes, Ted, yes.
And he's like, helping him wipe his butt, sorry. And so he said, Mommy, why do you and Mommy and Daddy argue? He's like, Lucas, because, and he saw us, like we were going back and forth in the kitchen as we're getting ready to go, So
and in the moment you're looking at him and he's like doing this like and you can't stop yourself from the argument. You're like, I shouldn't be doing this, but
so my question, we are modeling as we listen, right? Like these things are awesome, but it's impossible to do that all the time because we're not perfect.
Absolutely.
I also believe that it's important for them to see us lose our cool because they're going to lose their cool, and we have to model how to come back down from that, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think when in this instance, it's when they are wanting to tell you something big. And so I do think you're exactly right that it's important to model when it's right to overreact and when the time is to say this is not okay. I think it's when in the moments when they want to be able to tell you something big and they're wanting to make sure that you're not going to freak out based on what they right. So that's more of that mindset there with just
personalizing their stuff.
Right.
This is yours, and even if I react to what's going on with you, I'm going to keep calm, even though it's upsetting to hear what you're saying, I'm going to keep myself together.
Right, absolutely. And do you have
I think we talked about this a bunch, and so it may come up later, but I think I have noticed the times where I overreact are more about a recognition that I don't have control. And it might not be the thing in front of me that I'm supposed to be present for that I don't have control over that is actually driving that irritability and that anger inside of me. It may be something at work, right? It may be something else that happened earlier. And so I think taking a deep breath in and realizing that it's okay to not be in control with the bad decisions that your kids made that are going to lead you to overreact and those type of things. I think that actually gives you a little bit of like, okay, and you can move a little bit quicker. You still have to go through. I think you still have to go through those moments. When you look at like the like goals literature books, like John Acuff. I love John Acuff. He's a funny writer. And he talks a lot about setting goals. And most of the time when we think about goals, it's like dieting. It's, I want to do this for 21 days in a row, or I don't want to do this. It's really not about doing everything perfect. It's the day after perfect, right? And most of us are really good at the diet until the moment we're not. And then for some reason, we have to go 180 hard, like eat all of the chips in the cabinet, right? Whereas really what we need to do is acknowledge ahead of time, there's going to be a time where I mess up. So what does the day after perfect look like? Because that's actually that moment. And I think we have an incredible opportunity to model for our kids how we respond when we lose our cool. I think it's very, very powerful to confess in front of your kids, to apologize, to say, I was wrong, to do those type of things. I won't challenge you guys to decide who was wrong about the bread. Obviously, one of you was, right? I don't know if it was about crust or wheat or white or what it is, but I know that I've probably had the same argument. And so what a great place for them to see mistakes modeled, right? Is it's how you respond. So, again, like walk out of this room with a much lower barrier for what it means to be a good parent. It's kind of a hope for us. And part of that means that there is actually even opportunity and blessing in the times we're not at our best. Because that gives us an opportunity to show the kids how they need to respond when they're not at their best. So I purposely every day seek to make mistakes. And it's going well so far. Okay, I'll let you go.
It's going well for me.
I'm doing great at it. Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
An analogy that I use when my oldest daughter started middle school, and I think that's when the emotions really start. And so I envisioned it as she was going on the roller coaster, and she dragged me along, and I'm riding on the roller coaster with her. But really, what needs to happen is when she starts going on the roller coaster, you just stay there. You're just like, okay, I'll see you on the other side.
That is incredible analogy.
You're there and you're present and you're there when she comes back around finally, so it's like you're here and they're here, but as long as you're there, it's good.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Because you're right, because those emotions are going to roller coaster all over.
And there is a lot out there around this. I mean, there are actually therapy techniques around this. They do it in military training. It's telling the commander to get out of the middle of the battle and rise above and look at what the battle looks like above. They'll tell you to think about what if you were sitting back in the audience and you were watching a play that happens. There are even techniques that I don't want to go into like a long run on like the use of like microdosing of psychedelics and the EMDR, like light thing. All of these things are to actually to in a sense, like distract you from the realness of what is that's happening at that moment, to pull back out and look at it from a different perspective. I'm not endorsing all of those other things. I'm just saying that's what the attempt is at trying to do. And so I think in many ways, when we get into those heated moments, and this is a good topic to like exit on and talk about for a while and then get back on the highway. It really is about taking yourself out of that moment for a second so you could just like calm down. It may actually help you see some things that because the first thing when our emotions hit is like it's fog, right? All you can do is think about, I can't believe you did that. I can't be, like all those different things. And we'll miss the cues from them. We'll miss being present to them. And so I think it's healthy to detach like that and take a different vantage point. That's the roller coaster analogy is fantastic.
I like that.
That's really good.
Good. Good job.
We use the roller coaster analogy here that as parents, you're the foundation of the ride. So you're the concrete pillars that go into the ground that make the ride safe. That while your middle schoolers screaming, on the ups and downs of the ride, that you're the thing that makes the ride safe. And if you're screaming with them, then it's an unsafe ride and it's going to go off the rails.
That's really good. That's really good. And I think that we're all, we all fail at this is hard. I mean, this is why I'm calling it a mindset and not necessarily a tool, because it's just being there and going for it. Do not grow weary. Keep going, because I can't tell you how many times I've overreacted and have regretted it instantaneously. And they're like, oh my gosh, let's take that back. And done the apology and being able to say, I messed up there. And I think that when we do that with our kids, they're able to see that authenticity and that transparency and that unconditional love with them, where we're able to really say, I'm not perfect either. You're not perfect, and I'm not either. So don't even think that I'm there. And the last thing that, just to wrap this up, is probably a little bit better in giving a story, a personal story here, but just being able to really find the interests of your kids and what do they really love. And it's not even about what their wants or desires. It's finding out who God has created them to be. And so the story I'm going to share is just with I'm referencing Houston a lot. Emerson's there, I promise. She's got stuff. But Houston, my husband coached baseball for 18 years, high school baseball for 18 years, and I think he walked out, but loved it. Played in college, loves it. I was a sports person growing up, loved sports. And my mom, I was pregnant with Houston, and we were in Tennessee. I was probably 2 months out or so. It was probably at Christmas, a few months out of having him. And we were just sitting around the dinner table, and my mom looked at Tracy and she goes, So what are you going to do if he doesn't like baseball? And Tracy responded by saying, oh, well, that's not an option. That's not an option. And so we were like, and I was right there with them. I said, yeah, it's not an option. You're exactly right. And, as he was growing, of course, we tried all the things. We put him in baseball. We put him in soccer. We put him in all the things. And there came a point when he was about in middle school where we knew very quickly that baseball was not going to be his thing. And he decided that I don't want to play baseball. Now, because of the character of Houston, he's pretty compliant. And, he would have done it if we had said, no, you're going to do this. You've tried it in middle school and you can do other things, but you're going to definitely do this. And he would have done it, and it probably would have ended up perfectly fine. What we realized, though, later is that going through that was really tough. It was tough for Tracy, and just to think, because he had dreams, he had things, he had hopes of that. And, but looking back at that and now seeing where he is, we would have really missed the biggest blessing of seeing our kids shine on stage, and our kid be able to sing and be musical and do all of these different things that we had no idea that was even in him. And so now coming on the backside of it and seeing who he is and seeing that God has given him specific talents and very unique things just to Houston Howard, it would have been such a miss on our part to not be able to do that. And it's been the biggest blessing to us to be able to watch that happen. And so when we talk about really digging in, of course, you're going to put them into things. Of course, you're going to try all the different opportunities. But at some point, and that's hard to do, stepping back and not pushing on what we want them to do necessarily, or the things that we did, so they should surely be doing this, and stepping back and letting God take the wheel there and really just show us what their interests and talents are. So I'm gonna end on that one. And that's just that big listening umbrella and finding out their interests, letting them tell you through actions, letting them tell you through written word, and letting them tell you through verbal word. So, all right. I'm gonna pass it off to you, Dr.
I'm gonna go through just a handful of other frameworks or things that have helped me and Allison as we're raising our kids. I'm super thankful for Ashley giving us some practical ideas and things that we can take home and try. And what I would encourage you with all of these things is just experiment. Try different things with your kids. Do that awkward moment where you're like, hey, we're going to try something new. And they're like, we've never done this before. And, but push through that and experiment and do these things with them. Okay. So let's get real practical. How to, handle your kids when they're misbehaving at Target. As I started making this, I was like, this is actually the point where everything's going to go off the rails, because the moment I put this symbol up here, everybody's going to be like, oh my gosh, I've got to go to Target on the way home. And if you were taking notes, those notes now include a list of things that you need to get. So this is actually not about the store Target. You can't actually control your kids in Target, so just go on your own. Just figure out a time you can go on your own. It's actually about making sure that you have a framework for how you approach things in life. It is really easy to have, at this stage of where you're at in parenting your kids, to have whittled down the list of things that are important in your life that are all important. And I'm not going to, argue with anybody here that these things aren't important to have. It's the way you orient them that matters, and what is it that you need to do when you get disoriented, right? So faith is the key. And And I have a kind of a key verse for at least his first few, right? To love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and all of your strength. Even though when I was making this, put these, lines to demarcate the different areas of the target, the idea here is that you do not compartmentalize your faith, but rather your faith is at the center. And if you feel like some of these other things have moved and become more of the center and the focus, you stop and you reorient and you say, what is my target? What am I trying to hit? What is at the middle? You will notice that faith is in the middle and family is not. And I think that's a really, really key thing for us to get focused on, and something that you're probably annoyed with me hammering over and over, but I'm going to do it again. It really is about your relationship with God that matters if you're going to have an impact in your child's life to get them to have a relationship with God that matters. And if and we are in a society where it is, very honorable and very noble for you to put your family first. But if you do that, then even though family is a really wonderful and great thing, it just becomes another idol. So we will do this. We will let any of these things, even over here on the right, dominate. It is natural for that to happen, but what you want to do is you want to pull that back in. So around family, and all this is Deuteronomy 6, so you can follow it along. So love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength. These words shall be on your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children. You shall talk about them when you sit down in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. Right? So that faith that's in the middle permeates into your family. And then flourish is next. And this is just something that I've been playing around. One of the things that I love doing after reading a book was sitting down and writing out the purpose of my life. And if you want to do it, don't put more than 30 minutes into it. Grab a sheet of paper, 250 words or less, go. Just what's the purpose of your life? And then when you're done with that, sit down and say, what is the purpose of your work? And what I found in that is that there was some overlap between the purpose of my life and the purpose of my work, and it was to help others flourish. And so out of that mindset of flourishing is where some of these other things begin to matter, right? So this idea of fun, it is really important. Fitness, finances, these are your friends, having community. It's not that these things aren't important. It's that we need to make sure we're getting the order right. I'll share the other two verses with you. On flourish, I love, this is like a different version like the Message, but that we should celebrate always, pray constantly, give thanks to God no matter what circumstances you find yourself in. This is God's will for you in Jesus, the Anointed. So some of the next stuff we're going to go through kind of quick because you will have access to it in the resources. So what does putting faith at the center look like? I borrowed this from Ted Cunningham. He's a preacher. He's really funny. If you want to listen to any of his stuff in Branson, Missouri, he talks about life and specifically leading your family, kind of like driving a van, driving a bus. And all these things are important in how you make decisions about what happens in your life, right? So emotion definitely plays a role. We've talked some today about what it means to manage that. Experience, reason, tradition. These are all the lenses through which we look at life and make decisions about what's important. The key there, though, is to let Scripture drive all of it. And this is one of the things that is going to be a little bit unique rather than go Google right now how to raise your kids. Because we are very much living in a postmodern world. One of the main tenets of a postmodern world is that we live in a post-truth world. And if you want to think of a really simple example of what that looks like, even when there is a video on the news of something that happened, people will disagree about what actually happened. That boggles my mind. If you think back to like 40, 50 years ago, if somebody had a video of something happening, like you wouldn't even need to go to court. It's like, we just saw it. It just happened. And the fact that truth has become something that is debatable, that truth is something that is your truth, but may not be my truth, makes it really, really hard to get the bus where you want it to go. And so these are all really important things. God gave us reason. He gives us experience. He gives us tradition. He gives us these things. They belong in the vehicle. They should not be driving. Okay, so I'm going to move on. I love this. Let's talk about discipline for a second. It's a fun aspect. Nothing is more difficult than trying to discipline the you out of your child, which I think is so true, right? Some of the things that probably get us a little bit is when they're acting like us. And my dad had a famous saying. He didn't own it. I think he liked to say, peaches come from peach trees. And it was the thing that I could know for sure if I wanted to take whatever situation I was in and make it worse. When my dad was disciplining me, I would remind him of that. Dad, peaches come from peach trees, right? So I want to go through discipline kind of quick. But I want to sink in on this one piece first, and I'm definitely going to read it to you guys. That is small. So when I think about discipline, this verse comes to mind because this verse, it's a 360-degree approach to how we look at this. In this, the writer of Hebrews actually uses how we discipline a child to talk about how God sees discipline. And what I'm hoping when you hear this and think about this, I'm hoping that you will think about how God thinks about discipline is how we approach our child. So we're shooting for a 360 here. Hebrews 12, 5 through 11. My child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline and don't give up when he corrects you. For the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes each one he accepts as his child. As you endure this divine discipline, remember that God is treating you as his own children. Again, over and over, there's the identity of who you are in the midst of the discipline process, right? It's that third slide in the, recognize you can do nothing without God, be present, see Jesus. It's that identity piece, that child of God that matters. God doesn't discipline you as he does all of his, I skipped one. Whoever heard of a child who is never disciplined by his father? If God doesn't discipline you as he does all of his children, it means that you are illegitimate and are not really his children at all. And think about that impetus, right? A bunch of other kids, if they're not yours, they're acting up, you're okay with it, right? I mean, unless they're like really getting ready to set something on fire, that's fine. If your kid's doing something, it's different, right? Because that child belongs to you. And that's a good place to be in this. Since we respected our earthly fathers who disciplined us, shouldn't we submit even more to the discipline of the Father of our spirits and live forever? For our earthly fathers disciplined us for a few years, doing the best they knew how. Again, it's like a scriptural nod to the fact you're not going to get it all right. Like, you know what? Look, they did the best. That's all they could get. But God's discipline is always good for us so that we might share in his holiness. What is intended, that discipline would lead us to holiness. No discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. One of the resources that we have for you guys is a link to a podcast. I've listened to it like 3 times since it came out in July because I was like, this is exactly what we want to convey. And so I'm not going to try to reconvey all of it here, but just to let you guys know that you can go listen to it on your own. Ryan Kwan, when he's speaking about it, he talks this about how God disciplines us and breaks it down into 3 ideas: to train, to nurture, and to bless. I'll unpack a couple of those and we'll move on for the sake of time. But the idea of training, is that God approaches us like a personal trainer, not a personal assistant. And a personal trainer is there to help you grow. And it's tailored to what it is that you need, and what you will do for Houston won't work for Emerson. What I might try on McKenna won't necessarily work on Ella. It has to be personal, right? And I say that to also say what we're telling you about our kids might not work for your kids, right? And so it's actually okay too when you see another parent who's making some decision about how they're raising their kids, that you don't need to be guilted into feeling like that's how you need to raise your kids. You know your kids, they have been entrusted to you by God. Yes, you should use wisdom. Yes, you should use reason, scripture, all of those things, but it will need to be tailored to them and the phase of life that they're in. It is important to nurture them as well too. And obviously we want them to end in a place of blessing. So please check that out. It's definitely worth listening to, and has a little humor mixed in as well. When I think about what our posture needs to be, I think about this quote from Michael Scott. Would I rather be feared or loved? Easy, both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me. I love that. I laugh at it. It's super funny. But Tim Keller says he might be right. It's a little bit about balance. And Michael Scott wants all of it. I think for us, we're actually going to have to think about where we fall on this pattern of support and truth. So I'll read this quote to you. Love without truth is sentimentality. It supports and affirms us, but it keeps us in denial about our flaws. Truth without love is harshness. It gives us information, but in such a way that we cannot really hear it. And I think the role of the parent is to figure out what's needed at each time and to keep that appropriately balanced. And God will give you the wisdom to do that when you get to those points. We've talked about resources. Why don't we let you guys
Yes. So
scan.
We have given you a lot of different pieces to think about and to have. And so we definitely, Bob and I did not want you to come and then leave thinking, wait, what was that? What was that they just said? What are the things that Ashley or Bob were talking about? And so you can scan this, and it should take you some of the resources that we referenced, some of the links that Bob has, or some of the information that Bob has given you, as well as the actual application pieces of the journal swapping and the tradition, just different types of ideas for traditions and things that you can do. You can email that to yourself or text it to yourself, one or the other. And I'm going to let Bob finish. And before I do, my encouragement to you is to keep looking forward and don't look back. And I can only say that because I'm really, really terrible at this. I'm very good at reflection, and that comes as a curse sometimes as well. But a lot of times, I don't know if you are familiar with Romans 7:15 through 17, but written by Paul. And this is usually where I start when I am reflecting. A lot of the times is I think, oh goodness, where have I gone? What kind of path did I just go down? But I'm just going to read it to you. It says, "For I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate." And so a lot of times it's really easy in this parenting journey to go back in the rearview mirror, and just like Bob said at the very beginning, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Man, the reason things are the way they are now is because I didn't do fill in the blank. The reason that we're in this situation is because I didn't do some kind of action or say the right thing or do the right things. And so a lot of times it's easy to get caught in that. And so what I do, the flow of that, is to just go back to Galatians 6:9, to not grow weary in doing good, for you will have a harvest in due time. And then the last one, of course, in all of this, we're going to fail. We do fail. We will continue to fail. There will be more mistakes, more things that we will have to say I'm sorry for. And but the verse that really gives me security and assurance in that this parenting thing can be led and should be led by God, and to be able to just have comfort in myself that as long as I'm doing putting faith at the center, and as long as I'm putting God as the center, that all things work for good for those who love Him. And I'm going to read that as well, just to kind of finish my part up. It says, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. So that's my encouragement to you.
All right, so we're going to land this plane. We've been flying for a while. I appreciate y'all's patience. When Ashley and I saw the amount of time that we had allotted, we were both kind of like, well, that's a good chunk. Luckily, I had time as a youth minister with middle school kids, which meant that I needed to be prepared to fill the time if they weren't going to say a single thing. So I have that ability, but we are going to finish. And I want to leave you guys with kind of one last thought about what's next. What do you do from here? We love when the kids were a little bit younger, not much. I mean, just a few years ago, loved playing the alphabet game when we were driving. See a word and that starts with A and call it out. There's Apple. There's Beach Street. There's see, I'm just going to move on. And we were driving to my parents' house. They live in Richardson. So I've made that drive from Fort Worth to Richardson over and over and over and over again. And we set off to play this game and we are flying. And we play together as teams, because the whole place will melt down if we're not one big team. And we're going through A, B, C, D. We get to D and I know everything that's ahead of us. And I'm like, where are we going to find X? Yeah, I'm just sitting there thinking like Q, QuickTime, La Quinta. We got all kinds. We're going to be fine there. Z, zone, construction zone. This is no problem. Where are we going to find X? And that's all I could think about. And I missed E, F, G, I, J. The kids were getting it. It was great. It was going, but that's all I could think about. And that's what we do in parenting. Sometimes, I think we miss the present. We miss going from C to D and D to E because we're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get them into college? They're in third grade. It's okay. It's going to be all right. And that would be my encouragement to you is to just think about the next letter that's ahead and to not get lost in catastrophizing about the future and all those different things. The quote that I think about when I think about this is from Dallas Willard. And he is a fantastic author on all things spiritual disciplines. So when somebody asked him on a panel, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to somebody who wanted to grow in their spiritual discipline, who wanted to go closer to God? There was silence because people were thinking, wow, this is great. We've asked this guy who's written volumes on this to narrow it down into that one thing. Like, what's that one thing? He didn't say go to church more. He didn't say more quiet time. He didn't say fasting. Thank goodness. What he said was to do the next right thing you ought to do. And that really fit for me. It makes it so much easier. It's so much less overwhelming to do this incredible thing of raising human beings to go out and be self-sufficient on their own and to serve the Lord. The way to do that is to do the next right thing you need to do. And I think that Solomon supports that as well too in Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. Wisdom is knowing what time it is. Wisdom is being present for your kids and recognizing, oh yeah, this is a moment to listen. This is a moment to talk. This is a moment to underreact. This is a moment to overreact, right? So that's our encouragement for you guys. I want to pray for you as we send you out, and then we'll put the QR code back up if you want to stick around and make sure you got that scanned. Heavenly Father, we confess that we can do nothing without you, God. We need you for every breath. We need you for every thought, for every just blink of an eye, God. We are so dependent upon you. And we are most dependent upon you, God, for you to save us from ourselves. God, we are sinners in need of your grace. And we thank you, God, for the freedom we get of knowing that you are in charge of our grace and not us. God, we thank you for the freedom of knowing that you have an even stronger desire than we do to see our kids raised well. We pray that you'll just help us to be present in the moments that you've already created for us to be with our kids. We pray, God, that you would help us to see the value that you have created in each of our children, the unique gifts that you gave to them when you knit them together in their mother's womb. I pray that we would see Jesus in them. And Father, I pray that we could be Jesus to our kids, that we could try in every way we can to emulate the love that Jesus has for us, the way he serves, the way he was present to others, God. I pray that you would do this in our lives. I pray that you would watch over our kids, that you would draw them near to you as you draw us near as well. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. All right. Thank you, guys. I'm going to put this QR code back up there. There we go, just in case you need it. All right. Dr. Richards.